At the same time, the English were establishing a foothold in Virginia. They were also trying to gain access to the lucrative markets of the Caribbean islands. By the middle of the 17th century, England controlled several islands, including Jamaica. Collectively, the British referred to these colonies as the West Indies. It was here the English adopted the plantation system of agriculture, and with it, African slavery. In this unit, we will discuss why the plantation system required a large number of laborers and why the vast majority of enslaved Africans were sent to the West Indies. At its essence, plantation farming is the mass production of a crop for international distribution. This type of industry was perfected by the Portuguese on the sugar islands off the western coast of Africa and brought to the New World by the Spanish. The English first implemented it in the Chesapeake region with tobacco production. Both plantation farming of sugar and tobacco require an immense amount of labor, but there were subtle differences between the two crops that would shape the labor force of both regions. As discussed in the last unit, tobacco was easily and cheaply grown. Unskilled indentured servants from England were able to meet the labor needs of tobacco plantations at the price that was lower than the cost of buying African slaves. Sugar production, by contrast, was not only labor-intensive, but also required skilled laborers. The Spanish and Portuguese invested in slaves that were knowledgeable of the processes necessary to plant, cut, and refine sugarcane. It would have been considerably inefficient to continually train white indentured laborers in such complicated skills only to lose those workers when their tenure was complete. Thus, West Indies plantation growers were willing to assume the extra cost in acquiring African laborers because they could keep a slave for a lifetime. This image of a sugar mill in Brazil demonstrates the complexity of the sugar growing, harvesting, and refining process. By 1640, 250,000 Africans had been brought to the West Indies. By the turn of the 18th century, blacks outnumbered whites 4-1 on those islands, and the population of these nations reflect the shift even today. To control the slave population, English authorities defined the legal status of Africans not as people, but as property. The Barbados slave codes of 1661 denied even the most fundamental rights to slaves and gave masters virtually complete power over their laborers. Slaves would remain property for life, and should they have children, those children would be property as well. The codes also secured a master's right to punish and even kill their disobedient slaves. As West Indies planters migrated to Carolina in the 1670s, they brought with them their slaves to work in the tobacco fields and rice paddies, and the codes that would shape slave laws until the end of the American Civil War, nearly 200 years later.